is, or in terms of programming, is like picking assistance movements and how to pick like the actual movements you're going to put into the program. So I've got a little something like I call it the hierarchy of movement building. I'm sure I didn't invent it, but whenever I go about like putting together a training cycle for myself or for anybody else I work with, this is kind of a series of things I go through. So the first thing, so this is done usually per movement, but the idea is to take a look at like the lift itself, and then we're going to pick, you know, what exercise we're going to do to train it. So the first thing to do is just like to do an analysis of the movement itself and kind of figure out what the issues are, whether it's like a technique thing you got to work on, whether it's like a strength weakness, whether it's a range of motion that needs to be improved. And then we go through kind of these 3 steps. The first one, and the most important thing anytime you're like trying to bring up a lift, like let's say it's your bench press, is always to look at technique first. Like technique is the most important thing when it comes to getting stronger. So I'll use the bench press as an example, but let's say you're benching and pull down and we like over tuck the elbows. So you end up down here at the bottom of the bench press. So you see my elbows are a little bit in front of where the bar is, I press up and it gets heavy and like I miss here. I can do a lot of like lockout and tricep work and like try and really bring this part up so the top end of my bench is stronger. But no matter what I do, you know, I can get like all the skull crushers and like close grip bench presses and board presses and all that stuff. This is still a bad position. So even if I get strong enough, I can like push an extra like 5 or 10 pounds out. I'm still going to have this as a sticking point in the lift because again, I'm in a bad position. If I can adjust my technique so as I come up, all right, I got my elbows under the bar. That's a way better position to lock out in, and I'm going to be able to see much better progress by just improving my technique, putting myself into a more optimal position to lift than any amount of assistance work. And in terms of like investment in time to return, like what does it take to adjust technique? Like a couple training sessions to learn like a new movement pattern, whereas it could take like months and months of hard training to get enough strength to like push yourself through that kind of sticking point, and then you're still going to have it because it's a crappy movement position or a crappy position. So technique's always the most important, and then beyond that, we want to like build the lifts by practicing the lifts. So all right, you improve your bench press technique. You want to do benches with that better technique to learn how to do that. Next one is to pick those supplemental exercises, which I talked a little bit in that like continuous specificity, but like exercises that look a lot like the competition lifts, but aren't necessarily competition lifts. And these might be ones that like can have a slight favoring towards that like weak area. So if we're like, you know, it's a positioning thing first. I like to do a lot of like pause stuff because if you pause in a really bad position, hard to press, it's a lot easier, it teaches you kind of where you need to be. You could do some stuff like close grip benches or like board presses that would put more emphasis on the top end of the bench press to bring up that area. And then the final thing is that assistance work, so building muscles involved in the lift with like pretty different movements that aren't variations of the lifts themselves. So things like you know, skull crushers or push downs or like tricep work would be a place that you would like pick that stuff in there. And it's the least important, so that's why it's at the bottom of that little hierarchy.